believe in the gun, and our players don't use it most days. They use it every day.
In my 20 years as head coach, I've used the gun every single year. Well, my dream as a coach that everybody would grow up with the gun, because getting all those reps would make my job a lot easier.
Hello, everybody. Tom McDonald, NABC Board of Directors. I'm the 2-year college coaches rep. We've got some things, some housekeeping first and some thank yous before we introduce our next speaker, of Mike Brey. First is just saying thanks again to all the NABC staff, Jim Haney, Reggie Mitten, Troy Hilton, and everyone, Eric Weiberg. We have some people to thank on the side of, one, the gun for all their help. We've got 2 contributors. Really what they're doing is giving some things away. Sideline Interactive. They're going to give an 8-foot LED board for your sideline, free shipping. It's about $11,000 value. And then KBA, which is Craig Reed, he has been any coach that needs clipboard or a marker board or a magnetic board. He's been sending them all over the country to coaches that are going to be on. Our next speaker is Leonard Hamilton. But a big thanks, and I mean this, to Mike Brey. Mike Brey's been a catalyst to the projects we've been involved with, from the clinics in the fall. We got some problems, I guess, guys. Huh? Oh, there they go. I'll start over again. Lonnie, can I start now? Sorry, guys, we were rolling.
All good.
You can see the numbers on the bottom of climbing.
Oh, wow. Wow, look at that.
In the gun, and our players don't use it most days. They use it every day.
In my 20 years as head coach, I've used the gun every single year. Well, my dream as a coach that everybody would grow up with the gun, because getting all those reps would make my job a lot easier.
Hello, I'd like to welcome everyone to the NABC Championship webinar series. My name's Tom McDonald. I'm the board of directors. I'm on the board of directors for the NABC. I'm also the 2-year college coach rep. I'd like to welcome you again. Before I introduce our next speaker, Mike Brey, we've got some special thanks. First to the NABC staff, Jim Haney, Reggie Mitten, Troy Hilton, Eric Weiberg. I could go on and on. The whole staff has been unbelievably helpful and supportive in what we need done. We've got 1 contributor on the side of the gun, making this all happen. We've got some helpers, Sideline Interactive. They're going to give away to somebody on these calls 8-foot LED for the sideline, free shipping. It's about $11,000 value. Actually, it's more than $11,000. And then Craig Reed from KBA, here's what he's done. Any coach that's kind of stuck someplace else or stuck home, he's sent them marker boards, clipboards, magnetic boards for their presentations. And then 2 of the bigger thank yous would be Mike Brey, who's been instrumental in all these projects we've been trying to do, from the fall clinics, the last fall, and then the clinics we were going to do this year in the spring. And our registration was off the charts, and Coach Brey was instrumental and supportive and helpful. And then he is now the past president, and Jamie Dixon's the new. Our entire board of directors, all of them, have been helpful on the side of social media and their time and commitment to all the coaches all over the country. So with that, I'm going to give you a quick rundown of the bio for our next speaker. 1982 to 1987, DeMatha High School assistant. We'll get into that later. We're working for Coach Wooten. He was there for 5 years. Then after that, he went to Duke University. He was an assistant there in 1987 to 1995, an unbelievable success there. In 1995 to 2000, he went to Delaware. They're 99 and 52, 66% winning. Went to 2 NCAA tournaments, 1 NIT. And then in 2000 to the present, He's at Notre Dame. His career record there is 437, 233, 65%, 12 NCAAs, 4 NITs. He's been a coach of the year in his conference or by the NABC 5 times. And so with that, I'd like to welcome Mike Brey to the webinar series.
Thank you, Tom. Great to be with you. And special blessings to everyone watching. I hope everybody is staying safe and staying healthy, but we are always trying to find a way to get better, even in these times. And God bless you and Troy and the NABC for coming up with these webinars, because I think we're all learning from them.
Well, I got an easy question for you, Coach. First, you look like you're in a nice place. You're like sunny.
Well, I have been working on my tan a little bit. I have been trapped in Florida. I can't believe I've had to quarantine down here in Florida. Of course, I have a son down here and some grandchildren, and I am catching up on some quality time with them. But we've all become professionals at Zooming. I had no idea what Zooming was 3 weeks ago. I am a Zoom master now with my staff and recruits.
Well, I got the easy question for you, Coach. After talking to you and getting to know you, given our clientele or given the audience for this meeting is about 75%, 80 are educators, coaches, and teachers. You know, you've always talked about your background and being at DeMatha and all those, and then being with Coach Krzyzewski. Those people who've been in your past and how important they've been to you and helping you become who you are. I just thought maybe you could talk about your educational experience, being a high school coach, being a high school teacher, all those things, and see how it's helped you and the impact you had on student athletes.
Well, it was great to hear, Tom, that you said about 75% of our participants today are high school coaches. And that's how I got my start. You know, I'm the product of 2 high school educators. My dad was a high school athletic director. They were educators. That was the dinner table talk around my house all the time. And played for Morgan Wooten at DeMatha, and then came back with him after I graduated from George Washington and taught history. You know, at a Catholic high school, I taught 6 classes of history. I ran the study halls. And then on the weekends, as these Catholic educators know, we used to run bingo to raise money. That's what the Catholics did back in the day. I can run a bingo at any time to raise money for my program. But the high school educator part of me has never left me. Even though I've been in college coaching 30-some years, a head coach 25 years, I've always tried to be kind of that high school educator as far as communicating, connecting, and giving young people confidence.
Well, let's go right into it, Coach. Let's talk about just the NABC, and Troy can go on with you and him, but what's the NABC mean? What does it do? What's it mean? And you can kind of go through that. And Troy and you can go through some question and answers. Then I'm going to go back to the basketball side.
Well, I've been part of the board of directors of the NABC, I want to say 12, 14 years now. And it's really an extremely important organization, you know, to fight for coaches, keep an eye on legislation moving forward. Now, in the midst of this pandemic, we have even more of a role as recruiting calendars are changing, certainly the transfer rule, all of those things. You know, the one thing my goal would be over the next couple of years is if we could get our membership up. You know, it's kind of stalled for us a little bit. And I think things like this, Tom, that you and Troy are doing, so coaches that are members of the NABC know we can really help. And we can professionally help in that area for coaches, young coaches, really coaches of all ages. Now, we're at a little bit of a crossroads. Jim Haney, who took this thing, the NABC, from a mom and pop shop in the 90s to an amazing organization, is retiring. And so we're at a real crossroads of hiring our next head coach, so to speak, executive director in the next couple months that will move us forward. Never has the NABC been more important in dealing with the NCAA on some of the legislation that's coming around the corner. I mentioned the transfer rule, name, image, and likeness, all of the things. And really, there's going to be things coming out of this crisis we don't even know yet. we're going to have to negotiate with the NCAA. So a very, very important time for us. Troy has been on the front lines of the NABC for a long time. And again, Jim Haney, Reggie Minton, are grinding every day to try and help coaches, have a say and a fair shake with all the rules that are passed by the NCAA.
That's interesting. You said you've been with the NABC as a member for quite a while. Who's the first person that brought the NABC to you as hey, you should join this?
When I became the head coach at the University of Delaware, when I became a head coach in '95, the first head coaches meeting, I learned that I need to be more plugged in. I don't think I understood it as an assistant at Duke from '87 to '95 so much. All I know is, well, we get Final Four tickets. Wow, that's cool. And I didn't know. I didn't plug in. I didn't work to know. I didn't work to know what it could do and how it could help me professionally. And at my first head coaches meeting at the Final Four in 1995, when I became the head coach at University of Delaware, I kind of learned by way of Jim Haney and everyone who spoke back then. It was Miles Brand, God rest his soul, our executive director of the NCAA, that I kind of looked and said, I have to be involved. We have to be plugged in, and we have to trade ideas. And Jim drafted me for the board about 12, 13 years ago, Troy, and I've been working hard ever since.
Hey, Troy, I'll give you this. I forgot to mention it. That Coach has been a member for 34 years of the NABC, which is a great thing. So thank you very much for that. Hey, Coach, you talked about benefits of being a member, but talk about what, like you said, you've worked up from a high school coach to an assistant to the head coach, and now the head coach at Notre Dame. What is the Final Four? I know we didn't get to have the Final Four this year, and Troy had an unbelievable clinic coming in there. But what does the Final Four really mean besides the games? Take the games out of it. What else is going on the continuing education side?
Yeah, it was so sad, Tom, that we weren't able to have Atlanta in a Final Four. And I tip my cap to the NABC and Troy of doing more things for professional development. I was a high school coach. I would strongly suggest all high school coaches get to our Final Four and our convention. It's our national convention of our Coaches Association. But the number one, professional development, and number two, the networking part of it, which is so important in any profession, but certainly coaching, is extremely powerful. I remember as a young assistant walking through the coaches lobby, and a John Thompson or a Dean Smith, you could actually walk up to them and talk to them and introduce yourself and pick their brain a little bit. It's that kind of setting that I think is just so energetic. And I know in Indianapolis, we're going to look forward to having it in 2021.
Troy, do you want to go ahead?
The next question I was just going to ask, other than networking, what type of meetings do you find most productive when you're at the convention, just in general?
Well, I love the clinics, all the clinics and all the different speakers. I remember when Lon Kruger, who was president of the NABC, asked me in my second year at Delaware if I would speak and present at the Final Four. I was the most honored young coach in the history of the world. I looked around like, are you talking to me? You want me to speak? And it was a great confidence builder for me. And it was a great developmental piece for me as a young head coach who wasn't sure if he was going to be any good at this. And so I love the teaching clinical aspect of it, and not necessarily the X's and O's. Those are great, but the building of culture, the different ways of communicating, the different ways of motivating, I think the teaching part of the coaches convention is gold to us. And I know by way of you and moving forward, we're only going to make that better and more thorough at our conventions and our Final Fours moving forward.
Coach, what about the next generation of coaches? You've got some on your staff and you see them all over the country, and the guys that are men and women. On ESPN, they had their first woman at junior college coach. I think it's the second one ever, but right now that's you've got a female coaching an NJCA team. But what about the next generation? What can the NABC do for them?
Well, I think that's one of our major objectives moving forward over the next year to 2 years. We have to have that next generation of coaches to the NABC, becoming part of the NABC board, being a voice for legislation and all of the different things that go on in coaching. Yes, it is a time commitment. But you know what? This game has been pretty darn good to all of us. I've always tried to look at it and say, you got to be kidding me. I've been able to do this over 30 years, coach college basketball and do this. And so I really challenge and hope and pray that that next generation of coaches get engaged with us moving forward. I can promise you there's going to be some exciting things for our organization moving forward over the next year.
Hey, Troy, I'll ask you this question. I'm going to put Troy Hilton on the spot.
Oh, boy.
Troy, what does it do besides the Division I coaches, the head coaches, the assistant? What about those other levels? What does it do for them to be a member? What are the benefits?
Well, I mean, when I'm thinking about putting the clinics together, I try to think of all the levels of coaches because, you know, one of my best friends is a high school coach. I went to a junior college, did stats for the basketball team. I went to an NAI school that was in the process of transitioning to a Division II school. So I've hit many levels. So I try to keep all of those levels in mind when I'm putting clinics and stuff together. Not every high school guy has got a 7-footer to run his offense through. So, you know, sometimes those NAI clinics are even more powerful than the John Calipari's ones. So I try to keep it balanced. I think we try to give a little something for everybody.
Coach, I'm going to ask you some NCAA questions like the transfer portal. And Troy, you can, you know, share your thoughts too, but you hear on those phone calls we have. But Coach Brey, transfer portal is the first topic for you.
Well, that's the hot topic. There's no question about it. And if we wouldn't be in a pandemic, I think it would be getting even more attention, you know, right now. And obviously right around May 20th, there's going to be some decision on that. You know, I was a transfer. So first of all, you know, I transferred to George Washington University from Northwestern State University, and I sat out a year. I did a year in residency. It was very helpful to me. I know the way of the world is young people are making decisions to change gears early in careers at different institutions. I think the big argument's going to be this one-time transfer waiver that, as I mentioned, May 20th. And I think there's a lot of young people and a lot of coaches that want to know what's going to happen. My gut tells me that the momentum is more for this to be pushed to 2021, for those young people to get eligible quickly, immediately, without doing the year in residency. Now, that can all change in the next month. There's no question about it. But I almost feel it's going to happen that way. Now, I have been a big proponent of a young man or anybody sitting out a year, the year in residency. I did it. I've had 9 transfers at Notre Dame. They've all been undergraduate transfers that have sat out a year. They've been bigger, older, stronger, better, more mature, and they've had better years, and they've been 5-year men. I almost think that the year in residency saves a young person from himself a little bit, because you can talk about transferring the whole season because you're the 9th man. And then all of a sudden you get to the crossroads, you go, oh, wait a minute, I can transfer there, but I got to sit out a year, but yet I'm going to be the 6th man or start here at my current school, and it saves them a little bit. And as we all know as educators, many times we need to save young people from themselves. So I've loved the year in residency as a deterrent. I think eventually, I don't know, I think it's gonna change. We're gonna battle it. I know the NABC has taken a strong stance on the year in residency staying intact, but I'm not sure we can win that. It would be good and it would be wise to push this thing to 2021 and discuss it through another academic year, because it's gonna be too quick a reaction May 20th. for some young people. You're muted.
We're going to go on some questions that deal with the basketball side. You've worked for two legends, with Morgan Wooten and him passing. But I just thought if you could talk a little bit just about Morgan Wooten and even Joe Wooten and his, continuing that name and the coaching profession. But if you could just share your thoughts on Morgan Wooten and the time you had with him.
Well, I came in touch with Morgan Wooten when I was 10 years old at the Metropolitan Area Basketball School at St. John's High School with Coach Joe Gallagher, another legend in the Washington, D.C. area. And my dream was, after going to his camp every summer, I wanted to play for him, and I was fortunate enough to go play for him. And then when I graduated from GW, I went back and coached with him. I'll never forget him saying, and this is to young high school coaches out there or aspiring coaches, I had a graduate assistant opportunity at GW, but Coach Wooten said to me, Mike, if you're going to stay in this business, you need to have your own team as soon as possible. You're going to have the JV. You're 22 years old, but you're the head coach of the JV. You are the decision maker. You've got to write up the practice plans. You got to call the timeouts. You got to deal with the parents. You got to deal with it all. And I look back, and that was one of the best experiences ever, to have a team quickly that I had to manage. I certainly then worked with Coach Wooten on the varsity, but to be around a great teacher and communicator and educator like that for 5 years before I went down with Mike Krzyzewski, I was amazingly blessed. But having my own team at age 22 really helped me grow up quick.
He's also a pioneer on the clinics and campsite, wasn't he?
He is the ultimate clinician and educator, as you and I both know, Tom. God rest his soul. We lost him this past January, but what a man and what a teacher of the game. And I think he's touched all aspects of basketball. He is really known as one of the great teachers and communicators of the game to other coaches in the history of the game. And again, I sat kind of right there next to him for all those years, and it was a blessing.
All right, so then you leave and you go to Duke. So we were talking to Jay Billis this morning. All right, so the first year I think you guys were there, it was like 17 and 13. Then it was like 10 and 17. Then it was 11 and 17. And then Jay Billis, that group came in, Johnny Dawkins and all those guys. I think they were like 11 and 17. So in your mind, what was going through your mind at the beginning of that whole thing?
Well, when I got there, Jay went through 2 10 and 17s. When I got there in 87, they were starting to roll. They had been to the Final Four in 86. Our seniors were Billy King and Kevin Strickland. Our juniors were Quinn Snyder and Danny Ferry. And I was there 8 seasons with Mike, and we went to 6 Final Fours. So I go from being a high school coach with Morgan Wooten to going to 6 out of 8 Final Fours. It was not reality, quite frankly. But it was an unbelievable run. And the one thing Mike said to me when he hired me, he said, I don't want anybody coming down here who doesn't want to be a head coach. So you're going to get your hands on all aspects of the program. So when you get your opportunity, you're going to be ready to run it. And I am so thankful to Mike Kay for letting myself, Tommy Amaker at the time, we were joined at the hip as assistants. Jay was a grad assistant, but Tommy and I benefited so much from having our hands on everything in the program. So when we did go on to be head coaches, I thought we were very prepared.
I'm going to take you back in time. Are you ready? It is March 28th, 1992, Philadelphia.
Ooh.
All right. And I asked the same question to Jay Billis. Sean Woods makes the layup, right? With like 2.1 seconds to go. From when that shot goes in till the time they hand the ball to Grant Hill to throw it, just what was going on? What was the mindset? What was just the body language? What was all the things going on peripheral? I don't really care about the Leitner guy. I know he made. I want to know what was going on that bench.
That's a great one. Now, obviously, with no sports on TV, they're showing a lot of replays. That game's been on about 3 times. in the last month, and I'm watching myself. I had a bad tie. I had more hair. And one of the clips that I saw near the end of the game, Charlie Range, one of the great officials who's retired, was reffing the game. And I get up and start saying something to him. And Mike Kay puts his forearm under my chin, like, sit down, you're an assistant coach. And I thought to myself, God, sit down, would you? And so, things are flashing back. If you think back, when Woods hit the shot, how good was Leitner's presence of mind that he went from his hands in the air to going like that right away, timeout, because the clock back then did not stop on made field goals. So that struck me. That's always struck me as his presence. One of the things Tommy Emmerich and I always kid about, and Mike obviously is the best maybe that ever coached the game, and he was great in this crunch time moment. They're coming to the bench. Our guys are coming to the bench, and now it looks a little demoralizing. And he's saying to them, we're going to be fine. We're going to win. And Emmerich and I, as young assistants, are looking at each other and looking up the scoreboard and saying, I don't think we're fine. Like, I think we're in trouble, And I think the greatest thing Mike did in that timeout, 3/4 of the timeout, was convincing them mentally, we're going to win this. We're going to win this. Now, here's what we're going to run. And we ran that set at Wake Forest. That same set we ran at Wake Forest, and Grant threw a curveball. His wrist turned over, and it tailed out of bounds, and Leitner caught it on the sideline, and we lost. And this time, though, baby, he put it on the numbers. And how about Leitner having the presence of mind and confidence to know, I'll just take a dribble right because I have time, and I'll turn around and stick it in two guys' faces to win it. Little did we know then he was 10 for 10 from the floor and 10 for 10 from the foul line. Talk about a clutch, big game player. I've never seen anybody like Leitner and the mentality. So just, a great memory. And as I said, it's been on a lot lately.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. When you were with Wooten, Coach Wooten, and Krzyzewski, roles and responsibilities, you already kind of talked about, but how was it different going from high school to the college level of roles and responsibilities as an assistant coach?
Well, I was fortunate because, Morgan Wooten wasn't your typical high school guy. He was really ahead of his time. And Morgan was very much influenced by Dean Smith. They traded a lot of thoughts. They were contemporaries. So we did a lot of the Carolina stuff, to the point where how the assistants' responsibilities were lined up during practice and during a game. And that was great training because there was great structure in that. Mike was different that way, but he wanted input. He always wanted input. And again, I think it got back to what he said to me was, if you're going to be a head coach, I want you involved with everything. So, you got to get your hands and be involved. And so, again, I was really blessed. You go from Morgan Wooten to Mike Krzyzewski. That is the Johns Hopkins Medical School or the Harvard Business School of basketball training. If I couldn't have learned anything there, Tom, I need to get out.
Troy, I got one last one, but I turn it over to you. Scouting reports. When you were an assistant, and now that you've been a head coach for 30-some years, what do you want as a head coach, and what did you do as an assistant coach on scouting?
Well, the one thing I find about scouting as I became more experienced is give your team less. Can you keep it concise? I will, again, you watch everybody now because they're all on live, at least at our level. But I can watch a game, 2 games or a game and a half and have a pretty good feel for who we're going to play against. And we have some principles that we work through in our defensive breakdown to help with that. And you start doing that in October, not just 3 days before the game in November or January or the day before the game in February. You kind of try and get into that routine in October a little bit. Certainly each one of our assistants splits up our opponents and they, really dig into them. And then they kind of funnel it to me in simplified form, because I don't want to have much more than what we're going to give our team. We spend the day before a game about 15 minutes in our film room, and we call it notebooks, something I got certainly from Mike Krzyzewski, where they write down some strengths and weaknesses of personnel of who we're playing. We talk about matchups, and then we watch about a 3-minute breakdown tape of our opponent. And then we get to the floor. And then what we've always tried to do is work some of their offensive movement into our 5-on-5. Have your second unit, which is our blue team, run Wake Forest's entries here. And we'll play it live a little bit in the half court so we get a feel of talking it through. My assistants do a printout of a report that we all get. We don't give that big printout to the players, but it's there for our staff. But I have found that I don't want to overwhelm our players with too much information.
Hey, Coach Troy here. I've been at the NABC for a long time, and I grew up a college basketball fan in Kansas because there are no pro teams. So I feel I'm blessed. I've met a lot of legendary coaches over the years. Morgan Wooten was one of them that I never got to meet. So he's always intrigued me. I found it intriguing that he suggested you take the JV job for experience. So that's interesting to me. What was his advice when you were thinking about taking the job at Duke?
It's a great question, Troy. The one thing about Coach Wooten, when I got there, he was kind of anti-college for a career. He had been offered college jobs his whole life. The most famous was the NC State job that he turned down and Jimmy Valvano took, and they won it, and the rest is history. But he felt because the era that he was growing up in, or a young high school coach in, there were no dead periods back then. Guys were on the road you'd send an assistant on the road. Lefty Driesell was famous for sending an assistant, like, go down there to Moses Malone's hometown, Portsmouth, Virginia, and stay there for 3 weeks until we get him. And don't call me, until we get him. That was a little bit of the philosophy back then. So Coach was, and I was a son of a high school educator. I thought I was going to be a high school coach. That was my goal, to be a high school educator. I'm a physical education major. I'm thinking I'll teach PE and coach the team and run my camps in the summer, pretty good quality of life. And I got to know a lot of coaches, college coaches, because we had really good players at DeMatha. So everybody was coming through to recruit. And Morgan was a little tired of dealing with recruiting. So at 24, he said, Mike, just set up the home visits for Ferry. Well, I'm talking to Dean Smith to set up a home visit, Mike Krzyzewski, Larry Brown, Digger Phelps at Notre Dame. And so I got to know these guys, and Mike felt he needed a young guy that was going to be with him. And once I explained to Coach that, the recruiting rules have changed a little bit, Coach. Now, we're going to be on the road, and it's busy, but there's a little sanity to it now. Of course, Troy, we tried to give it a little more sanity with the 10-day dead period in August. That really John Calipari and Tom Izzo were instrumental in putting through. Like, when we got off the road in July, can we just shut it down? Of course, now we got a real big dead period for, and so I don't know what we're going to do in August, but trying to have some balance. But, I think Morgan and Mike Krzyzewski were very close. And I think he felt, and I'm, that will be a great place. And I'm always indebted to a coach by the name of Bob Bender. Bobby Bender was the assistant at the time. He then went to Illinois State, played at Duke, University of Washington. I think Bobby felt comfortable about me joining the staff because I was younger and I needed him to groom me. And he did. I wasn't going to come in with all kinds of new ideas and this is how we should recruit. And so I'm always indebted to Bob Bender for probably telling Mike Kay, like, look, let's bring Mike in here. I'll groom him. He's going to be with us. He's not going to take a head job in the next 2 or 3 years. He needs to learn it. And I was there 8 unbelievable years and really, really fortunate.
Let's talk about culture at Notre Dame. How do you institute team, locker room, culture on the bench, culture for practice? I mean, how do you put all that stuff together?
I think that's the biggest thing as we move forward at any level, high school coach, college. What is your culture? How are you identified? Now, I have been very fortunate that I have had juniors and seniors always coming through my program. And I don't think you can get anything done with a group in a particular season unless you can get them to take ownership of themselves, which then spins to your leadership. What are your leaders doing? I mentioned I've always had seniors and juniors helping me run the locker room. In other words, let me put it this way. When I'm not around, I had Rex Pfluger, TJ Gibbs, and Johnny Mooney. My relationship with them, my communication with them, a little bit different than the rest of my team. I need them to sell my stuff when I'm not around. Ask yourself, head coaches, who's selling your stuff when you're not around? Can't always be an assistant. It's somebody inside, man. You got to have somebody maybe behind enemy lines. Sometimes they are the enemy, and they've got to be communicated with. So I think that's first and foremost. Our best seasons have been when I've had a group of seniors and older players helping manage things and policing the team and the young guys before it gets to me or an assistant coach. That's the ultimate. And again, at Notre Dame, because we're set up with our mission, we don't have one and dones. We have guys that are 4 or 5 year guys, and they go through with us. You're able to groom them. And I'm really excited now. And it's interesting, the next regime of leadership. Mooney, Pfluger, and Gibbs are gone. I'm always so intrigued, and I lost the opportunity this spring to go in the weight room when the seniors are gone now. And what's the first couple workouts like, or practices, now that we have time with them, without those voices, those senior voices that are gone? Just to listen and kind of, is Prentice Hub speaking more? And then how do you develop a captain and a voice to help you in that sense? The longer I've coached, the less I've said at our first team meeting. We always have our first team meeting on Labor Day. And we get up there, and I used to go through a lot of things, and I know guys were turning me off. And I have my assistants hit a few things, and it comes down to this for me now as a head coach. I've got a sign up in the locker room, and I re-emphasize it on that Labor Day team meeting. Don't skip class. Don't throw the ball away. You and me will get along just fine. And people look at the sign and laugh. I go, no, I'm serious. If we can start right there, you and I are going to get along just fine. But I think the lines of communication, what we do, Tom, is great in that I don't know how football does it with 85, 100 guys, but when you have 12 or 13, 14 guys, come on now, you can plug into them like they're your own children. You get to know their body language. If you invest right as an educator, you get to know their body language. You get to know their good days, their bad days, their what's up, and are they comfortable enough to come to you and talk to you? And, even though I've been doing it, 25 years as a head coach, it's what gets me up in the morning, those relationships with young people. And then seeing them when they become a senior and walk out the door, more of a man and more ready to handle things. The pressure I feel, everybody talks about pressure to win. Oh, I got to win. You know what the real pressure is, I think, in our profession? Don't get me wrong. If I don't win enough, I'm going to be back at the DeMatha JV team. I get that. I get all that. The pressure is at that first team meeting, when you look out at those 12 guys, they are looking at you like, how are you going to make my dreams come true? And we know their dreams are unbelievable. Some are very unrealistic. And we have to temper that. That's the pressure, to have a good experience with me. I've had 62 guys go through in my 20 years at Notre Dame. And we have them back in the summer, and they start telling stories, and you look and you go, God, I just want them to have a good experience. Yeah, we want to go to the NCAA tournament. We want to try and get to a Final Four. But they have a good experience. I really think that is so important in what we do in college too. Again, that's maybe the high school educator in me coming out more. And I know the high school coaches on right now can really relate to that. But as college guys, man, we got to do that too.
So let me ask you this. How often do you meet with them individually, you or your assistants, and how much do you look into video during that time?
Yeah, I really try and get with my captains a lot, and not always in my office, because that's a position of power when they come to sit in my office with me. bump them in the weight room. Hey, I'll meet you at Starbucks. What time's your classes? I'll meet you for lunch. I'll meet you in the dining hall, just so they're comfortable to talk to me and express themselves. So I think that line of communication is really important. A couple of years ago, we actually had a rule where they couldn't text me. I had to at least hear their voice. You got to call me. We know we're into this world of texting, and I'm as big of an abuser as anything to get out of talking to people sometimes. I think I may have even avoided you a couple times, Tom.
A lot of people do.
After me, I was hiding from you. But you got to call me. I got to hear your voice. You can't text me, and and that type of thing. So I think to just be really conscious of that line of communication and them being able to talk to you and you bump them at different times. So there is a comfort to talk to you and look you in the eye and express themselves.
But maybe it fits right into the next one. Social media, how's it changed coaching and how do you use it? And then I'll go one step further. How can it, like in using or reporters, media? I mean, maybe that's the next thing. So your social media is the first question. The second one is, how do you deal with media? How can it be a good partnership or a good least partnership? That's probably the best word.
Yeah, the social media part of it has just changed so much for me. I can remember maybe it was 7, 8, 9, maybe it was 10 years ago. We were so paranoid that I had a rule, and I think a lot of other coaches, you can't tweet during the season. No tweeting. We put the hammer down. We were so paranoid. I don't know if that was right at the time, but, some kids tweeted some things that kind of came back on them. And there were some, other examples around the country where you went, okay, that's a nightmare. We got to shut this down. So we have, reopened that and tried to educate them. Of course, this generation of young person is very, they're savvy with their social media and their Instagram and their Twitter. We try to educate them when they get to campus. And I do have an assistant that follows everything they put out. And if there's something that is a little edgy, he'll call me or go, hey, so-and-so put one out. I think maybe we should talk to him. We put the rule in it. If you retweet it, you own it. If you retweet it, you own it. And again, that was all new territory for me. Now, from the social media world of recruiting, my God, have I been educated. I'm an old school guy, and I have learned so much. And we have a separate department that helps us with graphics and our social media content, as I think many universities do, that puts out stuff on a daily basis to recruiting. As far as the media goes, I think it's one where you learn the longer you're in it, you learn not to be thin-skinned. And you learn to be more, I'm better at that now than I was at the University of Delaware, where I read everything. And, oh my God, he said that about that. I mean, I thought I made the right adjustment at the end of the game. What is he talking about? What's his record? Anyways, you go through things like that. I think what I've tried to do is, because our kids can have rabbit ears, so to speak, or rabbit eyes to what's tweeted, you try and talk to them about that and for them to be thick-skinned, and I have to be an example in that world. But it's, for a young person in this world, it's new territory, and I've seen it kind of change a lot in the last 10 years, but it's part of the equation, and it's an amazing weapon in recruiting that I've learned to use.
Troy, go ahead.
Hey, Coach, you touched on this earlier in this webinar, and kind of a spin-off of what you're talking about there is, we're in an unprecedented dead recruiting period right now, which is normally an active recruiting period. So I don't know how much guys are doing now, but now they're doing a lot of virtual recruiting. So give us a couple of examples of things that you've done differently for virtual recruiting. And then the question I have for guys when I talk to them is there anything you're doing new because of this that you're like, hey, I actually might keep doing this from here on out because it's good?
Great question. I had no idea what Zooming was. Zoom meetings were 3 weeks ago. We got 2 commitments in the last 2 weeks by way of Zoom. I'm all about Zoom all of a sudden. I am a Zoom believer. I'm Zooming with my staff. I'm Zooming with my family. And it's amazing how productive you can be. And I have found that the prospects and their families have understood in this pandemic, this is as good as it gets. You're going to have to make some decisions based on a virtual visit to our campus, a virtual visit to our practice facility, watching game tape, looking at me across the screen and hearing us talk. Here's our nutritionist. Here's our strength coach. Here's our trainer. Here's our academic advisor. Here we go. And we have been on a roll doing them. And I think moving forward, I'm wondering moving forward, if it saves us all some time and money. I asked my assistant AD the other day, what did we spend last year in April and July recruiting? Because we ain't spending it this year. So tell my AD, I've got the memo, you know, in the midst of finances and everybody worried about meeting budgets. Maybe we can, you know, before Zoom, it was, right, prospect would be, well, I want to make maybe another visit, or I'll make another 2. And could you come back to school and come back to the home? And go, that's not happening now, Troy. I mean, it's an interesting dynamic moving forward. Will we cut through some of the waste of time and money when we get out of this? Maybe there shouldn't be 5 official visits. That's a waste. Everybody knows the 3 schools they want to see, or even 2. I think we've got some interesting things to discuss. Wasn't it Winston Churchill who said, never waste a good crisis? And let's not waste a good crisis here. As for our program, for the NABC, for the NSA, there's some things we can twist and turn and adjust in the midst of this pandemic. We come out on the other end, we may be more efficient and more streamlined. Did I just quote Churchill?
Yes, you did.
I think I did. Okay.
Hey, Coach, we have a couple questions. One is, what are the keys in developing a positive coach-player relationship?
I think sense of humor and upbeat personality when you're interacting with the young man. You may have to crush him on something eventually about what he did off the court or in a game, but don't start out that way if you can help it. Try and ease into them. I try and always keep our guys as loose as possible. And you know what? Kids know when they, for the most part, the young person knows when the hammer's coming. How do you deliver that? Can you deliver it in a teaching moment? And I've wanted our guys, Jay Billis said a couple years ago, your guys play with a free mind. That was the ultimate compliment. I don't want them looking at the bench. I want them to flow and play, and that's a little bit of what we've done offensively with high basketball IQ guys. So I don't want them uptight and looking over their shoulder. I want them to take responsibility. So I've tried to, be a little looser with them in that sense, to develop the relationship where they feel comfortable, and at least maybe you can break them down a little bit and get them comfortable with a sense of humor. I get on myself in front of them all the time. I'll go in and go, screwed that one up, fellas. That's on me. I got to be better for you. I totally screwed that up. I promise you I'm going to be better for you. I think that right there, using that throughout a season where you hammer yourself before you go and get a few of the guys and come back, it sets the tone. And I've tried to always keep that in mind when you go through tough stretches.
What has been the biggest adjustment in your coaching philosophy that you have gone through from DeMatha, Delaware, you could put Duke, Delaware, and to Notre Dame? Big adjustments.
I think one of the big ones, grand picture, would be don't overcoach. Don't overcoach. These young people that come to us in college basketball right now are really sharp. They have studied the game. They watch Synergy. They watch games. They've got everybody talking to them. In some cases, they've got too many people talking to them. We all know that about who they are as a player. But, from our offensive standpoint, is we've tried to recruit high basketball IQ guys, give them some principles, and play the game and attack and share the ball and be good with it. We led the nation this past year in assists to turnover. We're always up there and taking care of the ball. I really hype on sharing it, assist, don't let the ball stick, moving it. We practice, getting into some X and O stuff here. We practiced starting last year with this group with a 20-second shot clock because I don't want them to think too much. I want to get down the floor and get them moving. By the way, we should go to the 24-second shot clock. That's for the rules group. It's time to move this thing again. I know that's not going to happen. Maybe in this crisis, we can get a 24-second shot clock, Tom. But just from what I've seen, we practice with a 20-second shot clock, move it, and let guys play a little bit. Let them go, let them flow. For example, Dane Goodwin will be a junior for us. He is such a gifted young player, but I couldn't get him to take a good shot. He was too unselfish. And I would ride him. And I told him beginning of the practice back and forth, I said, hey, Dane. And he played his dad as a coach, and he's so fundamental, and he doesn't want to make a mistake. I said, hey, Dane, if you don't take a bad shot in the first 5 minutes of practice, I'm throwing you out. And he looked at me, a coach's son, like, what? If you don't take a fadeaway 18-footer with two guys on you, I'm throwing your butt out of practice. He looked at me like, you got to be kidding me. I finally got him forcing some shots at the end of the year. I think his junior and senior year, I may have to rein him back in.
I got Duke and Jay Billis said this, the phrase next play.
Yeah.
Is that a philosophy?
That was, that's maybe one of the many great sayings or philosophies of Mike Kay. On to the next play. On to the next play. I've actually used this with our team now in this crisis because I'm worried about our current kids. They're home. They're not in their routine. The other day I put a video out to them. I said, hey, fellas, remember when we start a game and maybe somebody's really jumped on us and I got to call a timeout and everybody's a little frustrated and they come to the bench and there's still 14 minutes in the first half and we're down 10. And I said, guys, relax. It's a long game. It's a long game. I'm looking up. We still got 36 minutes to play. Calm down, relax. And I've tried to actually talk to our players like, in this crisis, remember, fellas, it's a long game. We may be down 10, 12 right now, but we're going to come out of it. But on to the next play is a key. And I've even shown video of body language of young people. Rex Pfluger, as a young player, was the ultimate violator of make a mistake or a bad call. Oh my God. Oh, dramatic. Of course, he's from LA. He's a Hollywood guy. So I'd show his video. I'd go, are you kidding me? Like, would you move on? And finally, I think by the end of his sophomore year, he laughs about it now. He was he goes, Coach, do you remember that? God, I was such a punk. I said, yeah, what was that all about? But, you got to teach that. You got to coach that. And on to the next play is one of the great ones by way of Mike Krzyzewski. You're muted, Tom. You're muted. There you go.
My fault. Troy, is there anything you got from the NCAA or NABC before I play a little word association game with Coach? Not? Now, Troy.
Oh, go ahead, Tom. Thanks.
All right. I'm just going to give you some terms or words. You just tell me what comes to your mind. Okay, Coach? Team captain.
Team captain, communicator, helps me run the locker room.
Execution.
Doing it as a unit.
Loyalty.
Having each other's back.
Mike Krzyzewski.
The ultimate educator.
NABC.
Another ultimate educator for coaches. We need to plug in more to that great organization.
Tradition.
Consistency, being able to do it year to year.
Adversity.
How do you bounce back?
Trust.
Being able to look each other in the eye.
Leadership.
Doing the uncomfortable things in front of the group sometimes.
Teammate.
Someone who has your back
Honesty.
Someone who can tell you the truth through it all.
Commitment.
Being able to get up on a daily basis. And
All right,
do it.
I got one X and O for you.
Okay.
You can talk through different things you do on pick and roll, defending the pick and roll.
You know, that's a great one. I did a clinic about 6 years ago, and we got into that, and I said, we defended the pick and roll so many ways about 5 years ago. We were below average in all of them. We did it 4 ways, and we sucked at all 4. And that's because we gave them 4 options. And so I've limited my options to, we have really been more of a hard show, hard hedge group and tag that roll guy, especially now that the arc is longer. And I'm wondering if people can really light you up from out there as much as they used to be able to. But I tell you where I'm trending, because we play against it a lot. And we did a little bit at the end of the year. Just switch everything. I don't want to hear about mismatches. Just switch it and do the best you can.
I got 2 things for you. First one is, when you hire assistants or staff, what do you look for?
Well, what I don't look for is golf clubs. Abe Lemons had a saying, never hire an assistant coach who has golf clubs in his trunk. God bless Abe Lemons. So if he's a real good golfer, we can't hire his backside. But I think the ability to communicate, I like teachers. Our program is built on teachers of the game. We feel guys get better. And so that's been a big, big thing. Communicator, teacher of the game.
All right, I know you won't say it, so I will. You've done some educational videos that are really, really good on your 5-out, 4-out, and motion spread. So how do you describe your offensive system?
No, that's a great question, Tom. You know, without demonstrators or X's and O's, you know, I talked a little bit about the freedom to play and not overcoaching, and trying to emphasize principles of taking care of the basketball. Starts with my sign on the locker room. Don't turn it over. Don't skip class. We're going to be fine. That ball is gold. We're not throwing it away. Reversing the ball. Feeding the post. We still want to touch it down low. That doesn't say every time we throw it to the guy down low, he's supposed to shoot it. Even though when I tell him not to shoot it, he puts his name in the portal. But that's a whole nother story. But going inside out sometimes is a good thing. You know, playing faster, throwing ahead, throw the ball ahead. We became big this year. Just throw it down the floor. If somebody's open, throw the thing down the floor. And one that I've come to the last 2 years, when in doubt, cut. When in doubt, just cut and go without it. And, you know, when you have some basketball IQ kids, and we've recruited big guys who have a feel for the game and can touch the ball, if you let them loose a little bit, you know the other thing too, you start to tweak your motion after you watch your group play for a couple weeks or months. You look and go, ooh, this group can do, they show you stuff if you give them enough freedom to do some stuff. They also show you stuff you can't let them do on the other side of it. But sometimes give them enough rope to do some things, and they educate you. And, you know, how many times in practice I've seen Johnny Mooney do something with TJ Gibbs on a side, and you go, that's funny. We were talking about that this morning in a meeting. I like that. Let's keep doing that. And then you kind of wink at your assistants like, how about that? The players teach you. The players show you what they could do. They show you stuff.
So how often do you go 4-out, 1 in? And how often are you in the 5-out spread?
Isn't the power forward a dinosaur in basketball? Having 2 big guys play inside the arc, I don't see it anymore. We can't recruit to that. Nobody, you know, every perimeter player you recruit, you got to tell him he's a combo guard. I don't care how big he is. So I play 3 1-man, a 2-man, and a 4-man who's a space out 4-man, because that's what I got to tell him. So I think space, what do they say in real estate? Location, 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 spacing, 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 especially with that new arc. Open that floor up. Now you got to have some threats that stand behind that arc to be respected. open that floor up and play the game. And as we trend toward this, you know, that has become the trend. So we have been more 4-round-1 or 5 out, especially early in the possession. Everybody out until we reverse it once or twice. And then let's throw it to Mooney in the post after that. But let's open the floor first.
Coach, I'm going to say some pleasantries, and then I'm going to let Troy end the show, okay?
Sounds
Just
good.
look at what you've done for junior college student athletes, for June events for high school and junior college players. And also these events, you were a mastermind or a huge ambassador or person to push it forward. So from me, from the junior college coaches, high school coaches, couldn't say enough thank you. And thanks for all the support and friendship for me and for the NJCA.
Well, the high school events, maybe in the back of my mind, I got my fingers crossed. Maybe we could pull them off the end of June, but that doesn't look very doable. They were so great last year, and they were only going to grow this year and be more wide. But we're going to get back to that in 2021. I think that's been another nice, great stage to evaluate. And I know high school coaches have been very appreciative of it, and I love that part of it.
Good. Troy, I'll let you close it. We've got Leonard Hamilton in 58 minutes. So I appreciate everything. And we had a great turnout for your presentation, Coach. Fantastic. And we'll get you next time when you put you on the court and have all those players.
We'll get some demonstrators at a clinic soon, maybe in the fall. Thanks for all you do, Tom. And Troy, I'm all ears.
Go ahead.
I just have one question, basketball question, and then a personal question. Now, I'm always intrigued by every team has its strengths and its weaknesses. How do you balance making sure in practice, making sure your strengths are staying strong versus trying to improve your weaknesses?
Great question. And I think where we have been weak has been on the defensive end and the defensive rebounding. We've gone in and out of being a real factor on that end of the floor. So I don't ever want to not emphasize that or lose touch with that. And we do a lot of things to try and coach that and teach that. But we're not just going to win at Notre Dame, given our culture and how we're set up, by guarding the hell out of you for 40 minutes. It just ain't going to happen. And we're going to play the way we play offensively. Troy, if you get that 24-second shot clock, that would help us. But anyways, that's a whole nother argument. But we're going to play and take care of it and be efficient offensively and go from man and zone and get better defensively that way. And that's really kind of what we've evolved to in South Bend.
And then my last question is, during all this quarantine stuff, are you getting to play the drums at all?
I have not been able to play the drums, but I certainly have time, I think, this summer to get back on them. I'm doing my Pilates, I'm swimming. There's no excuse for us not to be in great shape during this time because we have time. So I'm trying to get back in shape a little bit. And thank you, Troy, for all you do at the NABC and all you've done. And moving forward, we need you.
Thanks, Coach. Appreciate it. Appreciate you.
Take care,
Have a great
guys.
day, everybody. Stay safe.
See you.
Thanks, Coach.
See you, man.